We are here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Let me make sure that we are recording. Yes, we are. Tony, we people showed up.
R- Really? We
Some
got
people
people here,
showed
huh?
up. We've got people rolling in. There we
Excellent.
go. So the people that have joined is what I initially had hoped that they would have registered, and that's
Ah,
that's the number we are at participants right now.
what number is that?
Right now, 22 people have rolled in.
Fantastic. You
Yes.
did a hell of a job, Latz.
Hey, the power of LinkedIn, right? The
The
power of
power of
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
It
There you
was
go.
all organic. We'll give everyone another minute or so. Thank you for all of the early birds, much appreciated. Tony and I didn't have any aggressive or super ambitious goals with the session. It was just to have some fun, share some stories, and try to help out some lawyers and legal professionals here. Um, I think you threw down the gauntlet and wanted to exceed one of my last sessions and surpass a certain number of registrants, which we did.
There you go. I gotta pull my weight somehow, my friend. I do appreciate the invitation and the opportunity. I've your approach to these uh the webinars as well as LinkedIn in general, as I've said to you offline, you've done an awesome job.
Well, I appreciate that. It's trying to take a little bit of a different approach. People that are going to be joining this will see that there are no slide decks, there will be no PowerPoints. We're just going to have some conversation. And now that we're officially a minute, almost 2 minutes in, a little bit of housekeeping, everyone, just so that you are aware. Hello, Owen. First comment. Great. Thank you so much. That's right. I don't know who let him in, but I think you'll get your money's worth here. So Owen has already answered my first question. The chat is working this go around, and we don't need the wonderful tech genius of Robert Williams to go into the back end and help me out to engage that. So, for anybody that would like to have additional conversation, please use the chat. But if you do have questions, which we encourage and hope that we get many of them, let's just make sure I can have access to the Q&A here. Where is that? Here we go. Let me get that up so that I don't completely ignore it this entire time. All right, we're 2 minutes in. We're officially going to get underway here, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. This is a webinar series that I host. I'm trying to do it monthly, but there's no actual commitment on that. As part of a LegalFenix webinar series, I am Ron Latz. I'm a legal marketing consultant and fractional CMO. I have the wonderful Tony Albrecht from Contender here, LinkedIn's leading legal ghostwriter and extraordinaire. And our intention today is to share a little bit of our experience, our successes, our failures around the wonderful platform that we both use to help build our businesses called LinkedIn. So before we really jump in there, Tony, anything else you want to say before we get started?
So far, so good. Let's roll.
Perfect. All right. So unlocking success on social, specifically LinkedIn, what does that mean? Well, first, as with any marketing initiative, marketing campaign, marketing strategy, you need to have a clear definition of what success looks like, Tony. You need to know what the goal and the objective is. Okay. Now, that might look very different to me, for me, as well as some of my clients, and I'm sure yours as well. So I'd love for you to weigh in and share a little bit about how that looks like for your clients, because I would have to say that that's usually the guiding light so that you're all rowing in the same direction here.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's funny that I, I I certainly agree that identifying what success looks like is key. When I started paying attention to LinkedIn, started posting more in late 2021, as I was leaving the practice, basically those two things coincided. Um, my attitude as I started was a line that my dad drilled into my head as I was growing up, that I was like a dog chasing cars. Now, he used that to describe me chasing young ladies as a teenager. Uh, but it also applied when it came to LinkedIn that I described myself for the first year or so as just a dog chasing cars of I did not have a specific goal with what I was doing on LinkedIn. Um, Other than that, well, I was trying to drive conversations for this consulting outfit that I had joined after leaving the practice. Um, but my posting, my content creation sort of started going in a different direction very quickly.
Mhm.
And at this point, as you're saying, like different business owners, different professionals are going to have different needles they're trying to move. Uh, and the thing that is universal, I think, is that once we start showing up, the trick is that we're trying to figure out how to start collecting attention and then being able to direct that attention. And so, how do we first get people to pay attention to us? I call that traction, that when you say something, people respond. And then directing the attention being that when you ask them to take action, they respond. And once you can figure out how to do those two things, uh, those other goals on whether it's lead generation, revenue generation, referrals, I mean, those things tend to follow as well as other opportunities.
Sure. I can tell you when I first started, there was no clear direction. It was purely sales driven. Like before the prior 3 to 4 years, I was just doing what a lot of firms do, sharing like company centered information, promoting job opportunities and job openings. I would support a lot of the people that were in my network just because if they were putting themselves out there, I want to encourage them, show them some love, maybe make a comment, or if I was going to be at a conference to start really again more self-centered, set up meetings, to have some conversations, to potentially open up opportunities, right? And I think for me that really flipped 3 or 4 years ago when I was trying to build up the consulting side, this side gig that I had, the consulting side of that business. And I wanted to just get back in the forefront of the legal industry. So there are a couple of ways that I approach that, but now as you have, more clarity and you do know how to kind of garner that attention in different ways to do that, what type of recommendations would you have for lawyers that are still just trying to figure that out before they make the next step?
Mm. So we're gonna get pretty granular here, right, Latz? We're gonna
That's
like
it.
I what I want to do in this time is get as specific as we can on helping people. So when you say like lawyers who are just starting out, I guess can we get a little more specific about, let's say you use an avatar. Let's use somebody specific
Sure.
where let's say that you're a personal injury attorney in the state of North Carolina,
Hmm.
where you've been running your firm, let's say 5 years. You've got a paralegal assistant, maybe you've got a second attorney. You've been having some success where the firm is starting to grow, you're gaining momentum. And most of your cases have been coming in through, let's say, those typical channels early on, which tends to be largely network driven, like
Hmm.
very early on. Now you've gotten to the point where you're starting to get into more marketing, you're starting to experiment, and you are the expert on these things, my friend. Um, you my the way I think about, and I know that firm owner, there are so many, not just law firm owners, but business owners across the country who are kind of in that spot. They're saying, how do I use social, specifically LinkedIn, to bring in more cases? But for a lot of attorneys, the question is, or how do I get in front of more lawyers who might refer cases? Right, so when that relevant case crosses their desk, somebody calls with it, that I am the person they think of. And so that what that looks like when we're getting started is, the way I talk about this, we all learned LinkedIn the wrong way. Right? I think I first joined in 2008 when I was still in law school. And from basically the time I finished law school in 2009 until I left the practice in 2021, it was just that digital bulletin board, right? It's the place where you go when you need a job or when you have an announcement or you want to share a company or firm press release. And that's basically all it was. And the mindset shift that sort of precedes, I think, all of what we're talking about here, Ron, in terms of unlocking the platform, is one of saying, okay, LinkedIn is the place where I go to basically like sort of announce what has happened, and like shifting from that mentality to seeing LinkedIn as a place where a game is being played in real time. And so, I just finished the second round of my Linked Lawyer boot camp last week, and that's the fundamental idea that we're dancing with over the course of those 4 weeks of training. Is that LinkedIn is a game. We don't think of it as a game, and once we start even trying to engage with it, then it's like, okay, we don't actually know what winning looks like. Nobody tells us the rules. And it's really discombobulating. So
Sure.
that starting point there, like once you start showing up and you start thinking about, okay, how do we leverage this platform to do anything good for our business? You what I'm trying to help people get moving is once you start thinking about it as a game, then saying, okay, what does playing look like? And
Hmm.
at the outset, that playing looks like primarily, of course, we're talking about posting, but I almost put posting on the back burner, saying if you can post once a week, awesome. That's excellent. You want to try to figure out how to start planting your flag in that way somewhat consistently. But the bigger thing is just starting to comment, actually, starting to engage with other people out there in the wild, um, in a way that does a few things. It puts you on other people's radar.
Hmm.
Like if you read a post that's interesting and you add something, that moves that conversation forward, then you are like in a way working to build relationship with that person who did the posting. You're giving other people a chance to run across your insights, your perspective, and then you're also drawing more attention back to your profile. Because
Right.
if you leave a decent comment, a comment on a post that does fairly well, often can, there's no metric for the views or impressions that
Right.
those generate, but I think often they may actually get more eyeballs on your name and your perspective than your own post will early on. So you sent me
So,
down a rabbit hole, Ron. I'm going to try to
all right, we're
avoid
going to bring it
doing
back. So
that.
we got PI attorney, North Carolina, right? Trying
Mhm.
to diversify their marketing approach. They may have relied on some other traditional or digital advertising via the firm. Now they want to get themselves out there. They want to be known for who they are, what they do, how they do it, so that they can create these relationships with other attorneys, maybe within the practice area for cases that they don't handle or outside their practice area because they want to be top of mind. So you jumped into one of the strategies, which would be like being part of the conversation. You don't have to post. You can jump into the comments. You can jump into the comment thread in order to kind of get over the hump or like maybe the resistance that you might have by just posting yourself, but it gives you a level of comfortability, right? You can test out ideas, you can comment on somebody else's thoughts, you can share that feedback, good, bad, or ugly, and take it from there. So we talked about comments. Let's take it to the next level. So now you've been posting a little bit, you're showing up on other individuals' feeds because of your activity. You're starting to prune your own feed because you're interacting with other people that you care about so that their content is going to start showing up. And now you've got a little bit of courage and confidence that I'm going to go and hit post myself, right? What are the things
Mhm.
that lawyers and legal professionals should consider? Like, let's go even deeper now into like specific types of posting strategies if you want.
Sure. So let's let's keep this fairly simple. The big shift that almost every one of us needs to make when we start trying to do this uh, is, again, when I say that we learn LinkedIn the wrong way, you know, part of why just about all of us don't like LinkedIn when we start paying attention is because it's kind of boring. And then also the idea of posting, I think for a lot of us, it feels like if we're going to post, that it's gonna be at best like a humble brag, right? That the things we're posting are things where we're sort of patting ourselves on the back or thumping our chests. And the the shift here is one from, let's say, being professional, quote unquote. And by that I mean what I describe as the like personified version of the like 1990s headshots that we all had, where it's just that, that background and
Uh,
we feel, yeah, I'm like, I'm a
library
buttoned
in the
up.
back,
I'm
library in the background,
exactly. Yeah, which
apples.
no shade, it can be done well. But like, well, for me, there was, yeah, I think about two or three where it's just, it's almost more like going to the Sears studio back in the 80s or the 90s, right? And just having those not great shots taken. So like that idea of professional, that we have to be buttoned up and perfect and not say anything that might possibly would not appeal to everybody, right? Like we try to stay vanilla. And the shift here is simply being willing to show up in a way that you're being real. There's so many of us run into this, you could call it imposter syndrome of saying, what do I have to offer? And what do I have to put out there? Why would anybody want to pay attention to what I have to say? And my counter to that is you don't need to be an expert to contribute to conversations on LinkedIn, but you are the expert of your own experience. So that's the place that you can start. And with my clients, with my boot campers, with folks who ping me on LinkedIn, I talk about uh, this idea of finding your corner of the internet. Like, what is the piece of digital real estate that you specifically would be out to claim and own? Like Ron, you're out here basically claiming like being, say, like the cream of the crop when it comes to fractional CMOs and legal.
Mhm.
Right? Like that's a piece of digital real estate that you are like in the process of claiming and owning. Um, I see we got Logan in the
In
in
the comment.
the chat. Jesus, Mary and Joseph, like forget the word chat. Like Logan's new attorney as of this year. He's done a great job through law school on LinkedIn, and now he's, let's say, like a young attorney. Oh, like Logan, where are you out of? Are you out of Knoxville or Chattanooga? I think it's Knoxville. So yeah, Knoxville. Okay. So Logan is on his way to being like the best plaintiff's personal injury attorney out of Knoxville. Like it can be that simple. And so once you have kind of that clarity, then you can get clear on like let's say the next two levels of, I have a brand pyramid I work through clients with where the corner is the top. And then after that, you basically have your people and your territory, your people being target audience and territory being kind of the ground you cover, your content pillars combined with your point of view. And well, see, you just get me rolling and I won't shut up, dude. I'm gonna pause there for a second.
That's fine. We had a question already somewhat about like topic selection process, and you just hit on content pillars. So Logan's trying to stake his flag in the ground around PI Knoxville, right? I obviously took the approach of wanting to be known as a legal marketing strategist, expert offering fractional CMO. I went a couple of different directions, but like figuring out what to say, how to say it, and like, does anybody actually care about those things that are genuine or authentic? Right? You hear a lot of people, this isn't Facebook. You're not supposed to be sharing this type of stuff on a professional platform like LinkedIn. Like, what are you doing? right? So we've had conversations about this where you would encourage me to do stuff like that and be like, Tony, like, I don't think anyone really cares. Like, this is not the story that I'm trying to tell. It's not what I believe the individual lawyers and law firms like want to know about me. Like, I'm trying to save them some money. I'm trying to help them avoid bad acting players within the vendor landscape. So like I was able to kind of figure that out. But for the lawyers that are just getting started or someone like Logan, talk to us through that process. Like, how do we then figure out how to do that and talk about the things that matter and show up where it matters most and have that conversation?
Beautiful. That's fantastic. So, when was it that you posted the one from your trip to Greece? Would that have been, I want to say that that was September of 2023. That's my hunch.
I will tell the reason why, yes, it was around that time. And I would
Okay.
say it was in 3 years, my third personal post that I would consider personal, and definitely the first post where like I had pictures of me.
Uh-huh.
For sure.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so that was the post where you were on my radar in a new way. And so I would say that post played a role in you and I having this conversation today,
It was
right?
the
Where,
monsters comment because I called my
yes,
twins monsters and you were like, I call my kids like that was what
they, they are monsters. They
they are.
really are. Uh,
Yes.
so it's this idea of how we build affinity, right? How the way I, something I'd say on discovery calls with people is that I do not do lead gen, don't know how to do lead gen, frankly, don't care really to learn how to do lead gen. What we're talking about here with LinkedIn, social selling, it's a brand play, right? You're trying to establish yourself in this digital space as a known quantity, right? You want people to know you, like you, and trust you, right? So that starts with the name awareness, right? That they're seeing your name, your face somewhat consistently. That's the know part. The like is that you're putting enough out there that somebody can get a sense of, am I interested in seeing more from this person? Right?
Hmm.
Is this somebody I'm even interested in seeing another post from? So a post like that where you show yourself on vacation, and you share a little bit about your background as a break from your typical life, 9 to 5. At that time you were at the agency, and then trust being, okay, if I have a problem, do I think this person can solve my problem? Right? And so to do that, you need to be clearly articulating with what you're doing out here, what it is you do, who you help, and how. And then also putting enough of that out there that people can get a sense of whether they trust you,
Yeah, but
right?
how do I
Whether
tell
they,
people that I help accident and injury victims, right? Like how do I think that's where we're going to get a roadblock.
sure,
That's where the
yeah,
obstacle comes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, when we're talking about what let's say your content mix looks like,
Hmm.
so you and I both tend to post just about every day. And the way I think about what that breakdown can look like, let's take that law firm owner that I referred to earlier.
Hmm.
If I'm working through the personal brand pyramid for that person, chances are, most of my clients fall along those lines, and their pyramids tend to look pretty similar. Your target audience there is going to be other attorneys. It's probably going to be other legal professionals,
Hmm.
maybe law students, and then also maybe a cohort in your area. Right?
Or
Could be
service
that. So some
professionals. Other.
other, yeah, let's say trusted advisors, right?
Yep.
So once you get clear on kind of what those different buckets of people in your target audience is, and you can have a few, then you're able to, when you go to put a post out in the world, I say it's like none of your posts are necessarily going to be aimed at everybody, Um, not even your posts aren't even going to be aimed at all the people in your target audience, but every one of your posts is going to be aimed at somebody in your target audience. All
Hmm.
right, so it's picking out who am I writing for? Who's this thing for? And then we're getting to territory. So this idea of territory being, I think most of us have heard the term content pillars, right? Those topics that we tend to stick to. And so, David, I'm getting to your question, and Bryce, good to see you there. Um, I think I'll be able to jujitsu my way around to your question as well. Um, you, so we're talking about content pillars being those topics combined with your point of view.
Hmm.
So let's take that law firm owner in North Carolina. The content pillars for that person could be some combination of uh, like representing people who've been injured.
Hmm.
So that's like your subject matter expertise sort of area. Could talk about building a business. There's that. And then there's the way I describe it is what you do when you're not building that business, representing those people. So actually, if you just take those as like a very simple framework to use there, there's like the what you do, there's the how you do it or how you're building what you're doing, that idea of building in real time, building in public, and then there's that how do you balance, what you do for a living with the rest of your life. So that post you're talking about, Ron, the Greek one that made you so uncomfortable obviously falls in that third bucket, right? And if I remember correctly, and I have not seen that post in like a year, I think you said something about how little you take vacations, I think, in that post.
Yeah, it was more about it being somewhat bittersweet. Like I love what I do. I'm very passionate about it. I enjoy working within the legal community, and how the last few days are always uh, conflicted with emotion, right? Like I want to get back at it. I missed the monsters as much as like I enjoyed the break and the quiet and having a meal.
Mhm.
That's hot, but I really did want to get back at it, right? So it was like this inner
Yeah.
battle of enjoying myself, and then I know I needed the break to reset to continue what I was doing. So I just, decided, hey, I'll throw it out there.
Yes. So what does that post do? How does that post fit in? Like that post, well, number one, when you're on vacation, you've got some pretty good visuals to work with, probably,
Yes, you do.
right? You're just in a nicer place, and that helps, right? That's one thing. Number two, it does show, like, aside, it shows something about what you care about, right? So in that one, it shows you're a husband, you're a father, uh, you're somebody who loves working hard, right? Like that, you were putting out all those things that as a guy who is a husband, a father, somebody who is fortunate to love what I do,
Mhm.
it's like, I see you, Latz. Like, right? You through that post, you're putting out these signals that somebody like me, who I'm in your target audience, right, in a way, as like another vendor, right, in the legal space,
Yeah.
that I see that and like, okay, I know you. That post makes me like you more. And then that post also helps. It's like, okay, so this guy, I will say at that point, I still did not really understood. I didn't understand what you did for a
Yeah.
living. I will say that.
I know. You
Like,
told me. You're
yeah,
like, I don't know what you
yeah,
do.
yeah, no, yeah. We've had that conversation since then. But I'd
Mhm.
say that one, even without me fully understanding, at that point, I mean, I practiced for 12 years. I was never responsible for marketing. I didn't really understand what legal marketing meant, right? But through just that post, you're building that in this like really peculiar and amazing asymmetrical way. You're building a relationship with me that you don't even know is happening, right? But your name is getting lodged between my ears. No, I like that guy. And also, I it makes it just that connection
Yeah.
between the nodes in the network makes me think that you could be somebody who could solve my problem when I have, and sure enough, you have indeed helped me solve problems since then. So if I'm somebody who's Dave, to your question about like topic selection, um, you there's there's one kind of overarching shift that I think a lot of us need to make early on. And David, I think you're far
Criminal
enough along that I think you've done this. Yeah, in a criminal law out of Massachusetts
Jersey,
and
Jersey.
out of Jersey. My apologies. Um, the shift is one where that idea of no, I'll stop that sense. Let's just edit this out in post. But
Cut.
that yeah, cut, resume. The shift is going from the way we maybe thought about a post being where it's just the facts, ma'am. Right? We are just leading with the information, almost like you're copying and pasting a blog post
Mhm.
into LinkedIn and pressing post. I think everything you put on LinkedIn at this point should have some element of storytelling in it. And there are exceptions, I'm sure. Let's say like particular one-liners or mic drops, maybe. But we always want, this is why I say like the territory being a combination of the topics and your point of view. You want to be providing some window into your point of view, your perspective, what life looks like from your corner of the universe, in just about everything you do. And once you're able to think about that, of like, okay, so if your topics are like subject matter, which say like what does narrative in the subject matter look like? You don't need to necessarily tell me like here's what to do if you in the event of a car accident,
Right.
right? It's saying, tell me a story about a client who called you after a car accident, right? Like one that stands out in your mind. And why does it stand out? Was it the situation that person was in? Was it a detail about your first meeting with them?
Mhm.
And was it something that didn't come out until after the case had resolved, something they said to you about the first meeting? Of like, when I first met you, like what is it that makes that thing stand out? So basically, instead of leading with those, like to your point, your question, David, about topic selection, the topic selection can be the uh, kind of like that same list you might use if you're trying to come up with what your blog posts are going to look like for the next 12 months.
Mhm.
But instead of then saying, okay, let's go get the facts for all those things, say, okay, give me a story for every single one of those.
Yeah.
What's a story that articulates what we're talking about there? And then let's zoom in and let's get really detailed on those things uh, as much as we can. And let's lead with that. So again, this goes back to what I was saying about every one of us is the expert of our own experience. It's like, all right, Logan Wade, he just started. He's just getting warmed up, right? But by showing his perspective as he's getting rolling, he's working on building relationships with people in this way, in a way that can help bring more trust, can bring more cases. And it's by working those cases that we're getting more of those stories and more of that experience, which is how we get better at what we do, which then helps us get more cases, right? That isn't that how the flywheel of business works, Ron?
You
I think
post
you're
and just
better
get
at
great
business than
cases.
I am.
You post and you just get cases.
Well, I was just thinking in general. I don't, yeah, it's, I mean, the post, yeah, posting and getting cases is nice too. Doesn't typically work that way, does it?
No, it doesn't. But the story that you're sharing reminds me of a personal injury attorney that had recently had a post about a woman that was injured at a Walmart, and she was on the stand and she told her personal story, and a juror had reached out and like kind of objected to the way that defense counsel was approaching her and belittling her. That's a case about, listen, it's a personal injury case, slip and fall, but like the way that the story unraveled and the way that they were able to articulate that, their point of view, their strategy at trial, how they address some of the challenges proactively, like I remember that post. I don't remember the top 10 things to do after the car accident. Now, I've been in the space for a decade and a half, so like I've seen a lot of those ebooks and guides before, but the perspective of that attorney going through that process and sharing it in a way, like you said, weaving in the story is what's memorable. And you get a little bit of insight into the personality, how they would represent you, quite frankly, if you were potentially a client. And then if you're another attorney, well, man, why wouldn't I refer a case to this firm if that's the approach they're gonna take, and that's how they're gonna treat their clients.
Yes. Yeah, and that's a great example where so that was effectively a verdict announcement post, right? Where that client had just landed a seven-figure verdict in that slip and fall case. And the way we learned verdict announcements is like, I'm thrilled to announce that
I'm humbled.
we, yes, I am humbly thrilled. And that's not me throwing shade because we all learned the same way. Like we all learned the same way.
Mhm.
The little trick there that I use is in that sort of announcement and any sort of announcement post you're doing, how can you make it so that the thing you are announcing goes from being the headline to being the punchline? Right. So in that one, after I, they got out of trial, I just had clients send me a voice note. He just riffed for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, sent
Mhm.
it to me. And there was this one piece that jumped out at me. There's the thing you identified, Ron. So I was saying, okay, let's lead with that. That's really interesting. Judge said, never seen that in 30 years on the bench. Like, let's lead with that. And then we can get into the facts of the case. And then we can get to, and it was great that the jury believed us, right? Believed my client's story, right?
Right.
And what does a post like that show? A post like that shows like without the let's say the chest thumping or without sort of I hope the things that might be off-putting, you know, a, a post like that shows that number one, that client of mine is willing to go to the mat. They're willing to take a case all the way. Number two, they can win. Hmm.
That's right.
So if you're somebody out here trying to stay top of mind,
Right.
and for so many lawyers, and honestly for other legal professionals, for say if for certain people, like let's say I see Jess Sargis in there, where Jess is
Aaron has a
building
question
it
about this too, I think.
aired. Oh, right on. So where Jess is building a coaching practice for trial lawyers to help them get prepared for trial. Lead gen is the sort of thing where we're always just we're trying to feed more into the funnel so that we're bringing more in. This idea of demand gen, of how do we put our message out there in a way that sticks in somebody's mind and helps them know, like, and trust us more, so that when they need that thing, you are the person they think of who can solve their problem, right? Hopefully, for a lot of people on LinkedIn now, when they think, I'd really like help getting better at LinkedIn, and they're a lawyer, hopefully I crossed their mind. Maybe some people, right? Same thing for you, Ron. For let's say somebody like Jess, you want to cross our mind as being, I'm the person who can help you get ready to go whoop some ass at trial. I say that because Jess is an MMA fighter, which I find to be just like fascinating and badass. Um, like it's a different it's sort of a different approach where it's like we're trying to establish ourselves and just claim that territory and just build relations with people over time in a way that those opportunities can start to present themselves as we get along.
We,
So yeah, keep going.
we've talked a little bit about here about this storytelling approach, sharing a point of view, right? And weaving in your expertise and experience with potentially the personal anecdotes as well. But what we're kind of shifting here towards, and if you want to go in a different direction, just say, Ron, we're going to go in a different direction here. But based off of some of the comments, I do think that we're bleeding into another type of strategy, which is whether it's legal adjacent, lawyers can also do this. I certainly am attempting to do this as frequently, but the strategy of hosting the conversation. Can you share a little bit there, like about how we can basically hold these discussions within this forum of LinkedIn to generate know, like, and trust and awareness.
Yes. All right, and I'm trying to track some of these in the questions. Hey Viv, good to see you, and thank you for jumping in here.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so I see Aaron, I see what you're saying, Jeff. I see that. Bryce is still at that one. That's on my radar. Okay, so this idea of hosting the conversation. Let's see if I can gracefully weave this in. I feel like this is like one of those Instagram video. Like there's I forget that dude's name. The dude who does like freestyle raps, where he'll just go out and he'll
Like
say,
throw
"Give me
out
five
keywords.
words." They'll
Yeah.
just okay.
And then he
So
just does it.
give me the beat, Ron. Give me the
There we
beat, and
go.
I'm gonna lay this down.
Lay it down.
Um, so you and I actually started talking about this maybe 6 months ago or so, where you were looking to how do you bring more people into your post? How do you get more engagement, right? With
Yeah.
with building LegalFenix.
Because for,
So,
for the most part, a lot of my posts are dense. They're tactical, right?
mhm.
They're in the weeds. They're about analytics. I was getting more comfortable weaving the story in, but I wanted to, frankly, figure out a way to be more engaging about a topic that, listen, not a lot of lawyers are out there ready and raring to go to talk about legal marketing every day. They consume the post. They're like, great, if this helps me save money, find a great vendor, I'm good, I got it, but I don't need to react or engage,
Mhm.
right?
Yep, spot on. And so this speaks to Aaron, your question there, and Jeff, your question there. I think let's say if you're going to post 5 times in a week, and if I'm Ron, let's say this, maybe I'll make one of those posts that more personal story sort of thing. Maybe I'll make one of those posts more of like a direct sales ask. I'm like, I'm starting to, it could even be I'm starting a newsletter, right? Ron, I know that you got into that mix more several
I was
months ago.
asking people to sign up for the webinar, right? I mixed that
Exactly.
in.
Or like this
Ask.
webinar, right? Yeah. So maybe one post a week, less than 20% total, I'd say, are like those direct ask posts. Um, and I think sorry, in that remaining 60% of your posts in a given week, I'm gonna aim to have those be stuff that's, say, in that maybe more how to. And so some of that can look like, and so Aaron, to your question, how do you package that stuff on LinkedIn? Um, like the stuff of what you do and explaining how you do it. You're saying it's tough to unpack in a virtual short form setting. Uh, Absolutely 100%. And to Ron's point before, like most people in your target audience actually don't. Am I allowed to use colorful language, Ron? What's the rule
Of course
here?
you can. We have
They don't give a shit. Right? That most people who might hire you don't actually care to talk about what it is you do. They don't particularly care to read about what it is you do. What they want to know is whether you can solve their problem when they want to solve that problem. Right? So actually, the way I think about this and why when it comes to reach and like getting more reach, for myself, I don't worry about it because it's the way that reach and engagement work. A lot of the people who might hire me are never going to engage with stuff, and I don't actually need them to. What I want from that person is that they spend enough of time with my stuff that they come to know, like, and trust me, right? That they think this is a guy I could jive with. I could work with this guy. And they trust that I can solve that problem. Once I've lodged myself in their brain, I don't care if you look at another post of mine for the next 3 months, right? Because I I will still be there. I'll still be trying to get in front of you,
Mhm.
just trying to pop up, just to remind you I'm still here. I'm still doing my thing.
I didn't fall off.
But there's gonna come a time where there's a pain point where you're feeling enough pain that you're like, maybe I should try to take care of this. So, Aaron, that's going to look like one thing for you. Jeff, that's going to look like another thing for you. But the idea is that we're mixing in these different kinds of content at a level where we're able to just stick in the target markets, let's say ICP, that who you help in a particular way. Now, I'm going to bring this back around to Ron, that idea of hosting the conversation and that
Yep.
strategy that you and I were talking about last year. It's basically been my whole approach to LinkedIn the entire time. And so for somebody like you, Aaron, who's in that, let's say, lawyer adjacent space, when you think about your target market, your target audience, let's say target audience, your people, that's how I describe it. There's the bucket that is the people who might hire you, who might buy what you sell, right? And then there's going to be another, at least one or two other buckets, right? And when it comes to how to put that stuff in a form that more people can relate to, I think you're actually aiming that how-to stuff, not at your target ICP so much. You're aiming that stuff potentially at other practitioners, other legal pros, other people who like nerding out about the stuff that you're talking about. So for Ron, the shift that Ron made a little bit, in Q3 last year, I'd say, was one where he started talking more about marketing that wasn't aimed so much at law firm owners. It's saying putting stuff about legal marketing, just flexing on what he knows, all that he's learned over his 15 years of experience in the space, the stories that he's picking up, the experiences, the challenges he's picking up from clients putting their trust in him in a way that's giving him receipts. Those experiences are receipts that you're able to pull out and share with us to say, I have a client who's trusting me to do this. Here's what we were facing. Here's what we learned. And by doing that in a way where you're not saying, hey, hire me to do this, but you're saying, this is really interesting at what I learned from this thing. You're welcoming in other colleagues, other professionals into the conversation in a way that they're going to be more likely to engage. Because I don't know if y'all know this, but lawyers, they don't engage. Like as a whole, they just don't. It's just not something they do. Um, but other people in the legal space are more likely to. And then that increased engagement can help your stuff spread more in a way that it makes it more likely it lands on the feeds and continues to land on the feeds of those people in your ICP that you're trying to get in front of.
Yep.
So that question of like, am I getting too into the weeds? I'd say don't worry about it. Actually, like if you can get clear on who you're trying to talk to with a given post, like if I'm Ron, I'm not trying to get super in the weeds, and maybe you have a different take on this, Ron. I'll say if I'm going to get super in the weeds on something, I'm not saying, hey, law firm owner, check out this really esoteric thing about Google ads. Like I'm aiming that at other nerds. And some of Ron's stuff is way too esoteric for me. I have no idea what he's talking about. But the fact that he's talking about it, in the words of Hansel from Zoolander, I respect that. Um,
It
so,
was Google Search Console and looking up branded traffic from potentially increases from billboard advertising. You text me, you're like, what does this mean? And
yeah.
I told you, but like there was a comment from um, Vic Nair on one of Guy Sakalakis' posts about commercials and firms advertising during football playoffs, right? And like he was hosting the conversation, and that's when I was like, okay, this is a question that is happening. Here's some of the ways that we can start tracking this. So I had a post about it. Now I'm talking to one person in that post. I'm talking to a personal injury lawyer that's an aggressive marketer that's also advertising on television, telling them how to do something, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't bother me that that thing gets 300. Well, I don't even care about the impressions. I don't even know what it did, but I'm talking to that one individual. And I do that a lot. Like when I sit down to write every day, I'm thinking of the one person that I think I can help. I'm not thinking about broadcasting a wide net over across just law firms. And many times, another one of my avatars that I speak to is legal marketing agencies, right? Because I've seen the insides of them. I've helped rebuild one. I know what they do, the shady things that they do, the wool that they try to pull over everyone's eyes on occasion. They're not all bad actors, but if I can then speak to one firm before they sign up and relinquish access to all of their data, that's what I care about. I talk to that one
Hmm.
person.
And you help that click into place for me in a way that in a new way that actually when we're thinking about what to post, or David, going back to your question about topics, actually instead of starting with what we're talking, start with who. That if you start with who you're talking to on a given day, and now you had me going to like content calendars, and I am notorious for not batching content. I'm awful at it.
Oh, oh,
Planning, I'm terrible. But if you can start with who do I want to help today? Who do I want to talk to today? And you can go from who to how do I want to help them? Like so to your point about the Google search where you said, okay, I'm going to help David Vickner today. And David had said this, he'd asked this interesting question. So I'm going to answer that question. And you do that. And number one, you're building that relationship with David, particularly when you have somebody like that specific, that direct, that is awesome. That's what whoever you are, if you've got those sorts of questions you can pull to create content, do it. Like, that stuff is gold. But even if it's just an avatar, just having the clarity around this is for a law student, this is for a second year associate. This is for an attorney who just got their first trucking case and they're trying to figure out, do I call a potential co-counsel or do I try to do this on my own? Getting clear on that, and then what's the problem we're talking about today can lead to, yeah, just better stuff. There was so we're
we got one in the QA left over. We've
that
tackled most of them here. We've kept up with the chat. There is
ah
about 10
ah
minutes left. So everyone, you could throw in some more questions in the Q&A or into the chat. If not, we can keep riffing. We can talk about another type of strategy. But right now, Delisi's talking about more of a formatting question around posts, spacing, usage of emojis, like making it
yeah.
easier to read and scan. I mean, I personally do it. Used to get kind of ripped on for it a year or two ago. It was called broetry, right? Like how you would have the spaces, and I know some people love it, some people hate it. I do it because I don't want to block a paragraph of text. I do think it's difficult to read. I've got my signature sign off one emoji usually at the end of my post to try to tie it in. I typically don't, I'm not, throwing in 15 to 20 emojis in a post. But I think again, personal preference, very subjective there.
Yeah, so Broetry had its moment, and I'm actually a fan of Broetry. Being this sort of hyper formatted format on LinkedIn where a whole lot of white space, there tend to be spaces between lines, tend to be more emojis. I still write like that, and actually, I'm a writer by nature. Um, I I actually think that it's a nicer way to write, or it's a nicer experience for somebody reading, especially on mobile. And we think about it as looking unprofessional, like looking like we're kids. And to a certain, there's a line we need to walk, especially when either we are lawyers. One of the things that I do as a ghostwriter is I try to be mindful of the idea that my clients do not write like that, right? Like my clients are grown-ups. They are grown-ups who learn to write in law school, right? They think in terms of paragraphs. Right. So if I come out here and I just have a 10-word sentence, space, 10-word sentence, it just signals they didn't write that. Right. And so if I'm an attorney who's trying to get in front of other attorneys, the last thing I want is that when somebody sees my post, they just immediately, there's a signal that says they didn't write that. They didn't do that.
Mhm.
Right. And so there's something to think about, and there's a line to be walked where more white space, I think, helps. I talk about posts being aerodynamic. You want people sort of flowing downhill when they're reading your stuff. The blocks of text can get onerous.
Yeah.
And so the more white space, shorter sentences, it just helps people make their way. And another thing I've found is that there's a sweet spot between the full paragraphs that we learned how to write and the full-on broetry where it looks like full paragraphs when it's particularly on mobile. They're
Yeah.
like, even if it's somewhere in between. Um, but ultimately that's uh Yeah, I find it's really useful. And then when it comes to emojis, I just like you do you. Like if you're somebody who uses emojis, go ahead, let them rip. If you don't use emojis, say no need to force them because again, that's one of those signals that can sort of make somebody think that you're not that person. I want to Jeff, that question you had asked about, okay, so less how the sausage is made, more how good it is. My mind goes to I think you posted something, and Jeff is a financial planner up here in Ontario, actually. Um, and I remember a post, I want to say it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, where you're laying out like a client's problem, like their situation that they were this age, and they were in this financial situation. And then you walk through basically kind of like how you got them straight in a way that was meaty. Like it was a pretty long post. It was very detailed. You did, I mean, I felt like that was one where you laid out kind of how the sausage is made. Like, here's what we did. Step one, step two, step three. And then you brought the story around to, okay, and now, they're the king and queen of Spain. Like it all worked out. Sweet. Right. So like I think that is the way to do it. Again, that idea of bring it into a narrative, right? The more that you can embed those how-tos, I, the better off you're going to be. Though I'll also say the flip side of that, how I would do that is like lists tend to do well. Like I tend to do a fair number of lists, and that's a way that you could take, okay, if I've got these things I want to talk about, I may just say, okay, I've been doing this for a little bit. Here are some of my receipts, and here are four things that you need to think about when you start showing up on LinkedIn. So it's like how to gain traction on LinkedIn. Do. So I'm showing my perspective a little bit. I'm giving you a little bit of background, a little bit of context, and then I'm also just giving you the goods on how to do what you're trying to do.
I'm going to tackle Lyndon's question. You read it while I give my perspective, and then you can chime in and tell me if you agree, disagree, or add on top of it. But you know, the comments for commenting's sake, the engagement type of bait or algo hacking is unavoidable. It's everywhere on LinkedIn. But I do think one of the ways that I've been able to avoid that is, you know, by setting up notifications for individuals that I appreciate their point of view or they have something thought-provoking and I want to weigh in on that as early as possible. Like, Tony, I've got notifications when you post. I know you're typically sharing stories about like building the business or, ghostwriting for lawyers or things that, are adjacent to the things that I do. And I think that they're there, that they are valuable. So if Lyndon, like if you find those individuals that you are connected with and you get the notifications, right, when they do post, you can be the first person to comment. And this goes all the way back to the beginning of the first strategy of how commenting can be a strategy. Because if you, quite frankly, go and you make one of the first comments on on one of Tony's posts, that comment's going to get a lot of visibility and a lot of awareness. And it's a way that you can also get your name out there. So that's, you know, if you get to a post that's 2 or 3 weeks old already and there's a lot of I agree, disagree, and you don't want to comment, just try to find some of the fresh stuff out there.
Yeah. Only thing I'll add there is that, yeah, a lot of the engagement tends to be that sort of engagement for engagement's sake. I hear you on that, Lyndon. I say, don't worry about it. Hey, do what Ron just said. And if you don't have something to add to that post that isn't engagement for engagement's sake, that's fine. You don't need to comment. The trick here, the muscle we're trying to build is how to comment substantively. That's what you want to be working on. And if that's like one post a day, great. And with a goal of it being two posts next week. And there's also the aspect of like curating your feed so that you're seeing more stuff that is worthy of your attention and your time and that just evokes a response where you want to move the conversation forward.
We're basically at time. I would have loved to have gone a little bit deeper onto that. Well, maybe we'll save it for the sequel, but I
We
mean,
didn't even get to the hyper local
we didn't
strategy
even get to
stuff,
the
Ron.
hyperlocal strategy.
Oh my goodness.
But I do prune connections, followers, like the feed, muting stuff. I came from a lot of other sales related roles where prospective buyers would connect with me and things like that. So, every once in a while, like if they're not active, if they don't comment or post, if they're not there, I will unfollow or remove people that are no longer relevant so that my feed is as relevant as possible. So
Hmm.
thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. We had almost 45, 46 people stay. I know now they're dropping off because it's 2 o'clock, but over two-thirds staying the whole time, Tony. There's a signal. There's a signal. So we'll have to do this again.
Yes,
Before everyone does leave out, you could probably just tell them all to find us on LinkedIn. Is that the best place?
you know it.
You
Or
know it.
just come to my house.
There you go. We'll fly up north.
There you
Perfect.
go. All right. Thank you, everybody. It was a
Thank you
pleasure.
all. We appreciate it.